Kayla Ryden had always believed that life was predictable, at least in small, boring ways. She knew the rhythm of the administrative office at the Galactic Academy, filing forms, sending memos, and correcting the occasional misplaced document. Nothing exciting ever happened there, and she liked it that way. It was quiet, safe, and uncomplicated. Today, however, that illusion of normalcy shattered in the most unexpected way. She had been waiting in line at the office's terminal, tapping her fingers impatiently, when a soft chime announced her turn. A clerk barely glanced at her before sliding a single slip of paper across the counter. "Sign here," he muttered, already distracted by a holoscreen displaying interstellar tax records. Kayla reached for the slip and squinted at the official markings. Her eyes jumped across the text. Something didn't make sense. She wasn't expecting a combat assignment. Not ever. Her career path had been clear. Paperwork, analysis, routine. She had specifically double-checked that her records reflected her desire for administrative duties, but the slip told a different story. It was stamped with a red insignia that made her stomach drop. Deathworld Combat Class Candidate. She stared, mouth slightly open, as her mind tried to process the words. Deathworld? Combat? Candidate? Her fingers tightened around the slip. She looked up at the clerk, hoping for some sign that he would stop her before she walked into disaster. "You? I think there's been a mistake," she said carefully. The clerk didn't look up. He typed rapidly, muttered something under his breath, and waved her off. Next. Kayla blinked, heart hammering. She tried to speak again, louder this time. "I mean, this is wrong."
"I'm not,"
a sharp, metallic voice cut through the office. "All candidates must report immediately."
Kayla turned to see the command administrator standing at the end of the room, hollow tablet in hand, reviewing her slip. Her pulse spiked.
The woman's expression was unreadable, but her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and subtle warning. Kayla opened her mouth, but no words came out. The administrator glanced at the clerk. "File it as it is." No corrections. Kayla felt her world tilt.
"No corrections? Not even a chance to explain?" "Wait," she started again, but the administrator's gaze bored into her. "Do you have a choice?" she asked, her tone deceptively calm.
Kayla swallowed hard. The clerk looked away, pretending he wasn't watching. The administrator's voice softened, almost kindly, yet cold as steel. "Choices are overrated. Adapt or disappear." Before Kayla could protest further, a transport drone arrived at the office's loading dock. Its doors hissed open, revealing the harsh lights of the shuttle bay. Uniformed officers motioned her inside, without a word. The shuttle smelled of oil and recycled air. Kayla sat stiffly, her hands gripping the seat edges as the engines thrummed beneath her. Around her were others, or what she assumed were others. Candidates for the Deathworld combat class. They were tall, muscular, clearly modified beyond what she could understand. Some had cybernetic limbs, others strange eyes that glowed faintly. They spoke to each other in low growls and whispers she couldn't comprehend. Kayla's throat went dry. She looked down at herself, at her ordinary human form, her unenhanced arms and legs, and suddenly felt absurdly fragile. She was out of place, but the shuttle's doors closed before she could dwell on it. The journey was long. The shuttle passed through countless star systems, each more alien than the last. Kayla spent the time staring at the stars outside, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She thought of all the ways this could end badly. Eaten by predators, failing tests, becoming an embarrassment. The possibilities spiraled in her mind. When the shuttle finally landed, Kayla realized she had been holding her breath. The ramp extended, and the first thing she saw was the dense jungle of Tarak, 9, the Deathworld planet. It was a world alive in ways that terrified her. Towering trees with bark like cracked obsidian stretched toward a green-yellow sky. Vines hung like snakes, some thick as a human torso, others thin and whip-like. The ground squirmed with movement. She caught glimpses of massive creatures darting through the foliage, some with scales that shimmered like metal, others with claws sharp enough to slice through stone. Kayla stepped cautiously onto the soil. Her senses were overwhelmed. Every sound was amplified. The snapping of twigs, the screech of unseen creatures, the distant roar of something enormous moving in the treetops. The air was thick and humid, carrying a metallic tang that made her stomach turn. A voice barked from the distance. "Form up!" Kayla turned to see an alien instructor approaching. It was tall, almost twice her height, with skin patterned like a desert snake and eyes that glowed a soft red. Its limbs were longer than human arms, ending in talons sharper than any blade she'd seen. The creature exuded authority, and Kayla felt the weight of every lesson she'd ever learned about survival pressed down on her. "This," it said, gesturing to the jungle, "is your new home. Survive. Adapt. Or perish." The other candidates moved with confidence, their limbs moving with precision and skill Kayla couldn't match. They carried exotic weapons, jetpacks, and shields that seemed to hum with energy. Kayla only had her training kit, a standard-issue human survival pack, and the stubborn will that had carried her through every small challenge of her life. Her first day was a trial unlike any she could have imagined. The instructors guided them through the jungle, pointing out hazards and setting tasks meant to test reflexes, speed, and decision-making. Kayla struggled to keep pace. Every branch, every vine, every creature seemed designed to make her fail. A sudden screech above her head made her duck just in time to avoid a falling predator, its claws slicing through the leaves where her head had been moments before. By the time the first lesson ended, sweat dripped down her face, her muscles ached, and her lungs burned. But she was alive, and she realized something vital. The jungle did not forgive mistakes, but it rewarded observation. That evening, the candidates were gathered in the encampment. Kyla found a quiet corner and examined her survival pack. She had rations, a small knife, a portable scanner, and a basic medkit. She knew instinctively she couldn't rely on her physical strength alone. On Tarak, 9. Thinking fast could mean the difference between life and death. She watched the other candidates. Some boasted about their exploits, clearly enjoying the thrill of dominance. Others shared stories of their previous training worlds, talking about how they had mastered environments far more deadly than anything a human could endure. Kayla's pulse quickened, not from fear, but determination. She realized she would have to outthink them, outlast them, and use the jungle itself as her ally. Her first night on Tarak, 9, was merciless. The sounds of the jungle never ceased. Kayla lay in her shelter, a flimsy structure barely holding back the oppressive darkness. Somewhere nearby, creatures scuttled, their claws tapping against rocks and wood. She forced herself to breathe slowly to stay calm. Fear was natural, she told herself, but fear could be turned into focus. By dawn, Kayla was awake, her body tense and ready. The first official combat exercise began with a loud horn echoing through the jungle. The candidates were released into the forest to locate survival markers while avoiding predators, set loose by the instructors. Kayla moved cautiously, stepping lightly on roots, listening for the faintest movements. Hours passed. One candidate, a hulking alien with blades for arms, had already fallen victim to a predator. Kayla noted the trap, the way the creature had been drawn to a false trail. She memorized the patterns, using them to move safely. Slowly, she began marking her path, thinking ahead to the next challenge. By the end of the day, Kayla had not only survived, but reached one of the survival markers. The instructors nodded in approval, and some of the other candidates looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. She didn't feel triumphant. She knew this was only the beginning. But she felt something she hadn't expected, a spark of confidence. Kayla Ryden, ordinary human girl, misfiled into a class meant for the galaxy's deadliest, had survived her first day on Tarak, 9. And deep down, she realized something important. Survival was not about strength alone. It was about observation, adaptation, and refusing to surrender, no matter how impossible the odds. And as she lay under the alien stars that night, listening to the jungle's endless hum, Kayla made a silent promise to herself. She would not just survive. She would endure. She would learn. And one day, she would show every creature in that deadly forest and every being across the galaxy exactly what a human could do.
Kayla Ryden woke before dawn, her muscles sore and her mind alert. The jungle of Tarak.
9 had not grown any less hostile overnight. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow suspicious. She unrolled her meager bedding and checked her pack, making sure her knife and scanner were within reach. Humans were small, weak, and fragile compared to most species in the galaxy. On Tarak, 9, that meant only one thing. If she was going to survive, she would have to rely on her wits.
The other candidates were already moving through the dense forest, their footsteps quiet but confident.
Many had cybernetic enhancements. Some had genetically reinforced skeletons. Others had weapons that could cut through stone. Kayla, by contrast, had nothing extraordinary except her adaptability and the stubborn will that had always carried her through difficult situations. The morning's challenge was simple in concept but deadly in execution. The candidates had to hunt a native predator, a creature called a razorback stalker, without being killed. The creature was massive, faster than a human could run, and equipped with claws that could shred metal. It was intelligent, able to anticipate the moves of prey, and utterly ruthless. Kayla watched as the other candidates moved into the clearing, their confidence obvious. They carried energy rifles, throwing blades, and shields that vibrated with force fields. Most of them went straight for the hunt, chasing the razorback with reckless courage. Kayla took a step back and studied the environment. The jungle itself offered clues. She noticed the broken branches in one area, scratches on tree trunks, and faint footprints partially hidden in the mud. The razorback's path could be predicted if she paid attention. While the others relied on strength and technology, Kayala relied on observation. Hours passed, one by one. The enhanced candidates fell into the razorback's traps. Some were dragged into the trees by the creature's massive claws. Others were lacerated by the beast before they could fire a single shot. Kayla stayed hidden, moving with slow, careful precision. She didn't need to confront the creature head-on. Survival meant patience. By midday, Kayla had made her first move. She set a simple trap using vines and heavy stones, just as she had learned from watching the razorback's movements. It wasn't lethal, but it would slow the creature long enough for her to escape if necessary.
The razorback came charging, a blur of fur and muscle, and fell into her trap, thrashing wildly. Kayla darted to the side, keeping her distance but maintaining control of the situation.
She realized something crucial. The razorback, like every creature on Tarak, 9, was predictable in patterns. Not rigid patterns, but patterns nonetheless. It reacted to stimuli, to sound, to movement. She could use that to her advantage. Humans were not the fastest or the strongest, but they were observers. They adapted. They learned. The instructors watched from a distance, their expressions unreadable. Some candidates looked at Kayla with disbelief. How could a frail human girl, barely armed and slower than most, survive where warriors had fallen in minutes? Kayla ignored them. She didn't hunt for admiration. She hunted to live. By late afternoon, she had captured the razorback using a combination of traps, stealth, and psychological tricks. The creature was alive, but immobilized. She signaled to the instructors, and they nodded in approval. Kayla allowed herself a brief smile. One predator down, countless challenges ahead. That evening, the candidates were gathered for a debrief. The instructors praised efficiency, adaptability, and mental acuity. Kayla stayed quiet, listening carefully. Every word mattered. Every lesson could mean the difference between life and death in this environment. During the night, Kayla stayed alert. The jungle never slept. She heard movement above her shelter, something large and unfamiliar. Most candidates would have panicked, but Kayla focused on listening, observing, and predicting. The creature passed by without noticing her. She realized that fear was natural, but control of fear was powerful. It allowed humans to act while others froze. The next day brought the terrain challenge, a test designed to push the candidates to their limits. They were to cross a valley filled with poisonous plants, unstable ground, and hidden predators. The other candidates dashed ahead with confidence, ignoring the subtle dangers Kayla noticed immediately. Kayla moved cautiously, testing the ground with a stick, noting the movement of leaves, listening for the faintest hisses. Her approach was slower, but safer. When one of the enhanced candidates stepped onto a seemingly solid patch of ground, it gave way, dropping him into a pit of venomous plants. Kayla took mental notes. Every failure she witnessed was a lesson she could use. By mid-afternoon, Kayla was halfway across the valley. Her senses were alert, her body exhausted but functioning. She encountered a small river teeming with semi-aquatic predators. The others tried to swim across using brute force, and many were injured by the creatures lurking beneath the water. Kayla observed, waited for a calm moment, and used fallen branches to create a temporary bridge. It took longer, but she crossed safely. Her ingenuity was becoming evident. The instructors whispered among themselves. The genetically enhanced students were frustrated. How could this human, so seemingly weak, consistently survive challenges that had defeated the strongest of them? Kayla didn't care about their jealousy. She cared about staying alive and learning everything she could about Tarak. 9. By the time she reached the far side of the valley, night had fallen. She found a safe spot for the night, far from predators and sheltered from the wind. She checked her medkit and rations, carefully conserving her supplies. Hunger and fatigue were constant companions, but they did not defeat her. The following morning, Kayla faced the team combat exercise. Candidates were paired to take down a simulated enemy squad in the jungle. Kayla's partner was a towering alien with cybernetic limbs, quick and strong. At first, they clashed. The alien's strategy relied on strength and aggression, while Kayla preferred stealth and observation. But she adapted quickly. Instead of trying to overpower the alien, she complemented its strengths, predicting enemy moves and creating diversions. By the end of the exercise, their simulated squad was defeated. The instructors nodded, clearly impressed with her strategic thinking. The alien partner, who had once doubted her, looked at Kayla with a mixture of respect and caution. Kayla began to understand something fundamental. Raw power could be outmatched by intelligence and adaptability. She could not compete physically with the enhanced candidates, but she could outthink them. Tarak, 9 was dangerous, yes, but it was also predictable if one paid attention. Humans, it seemed, had a natural advantage in this regard. That night, as she sat by a small fire, Kayla reflected on her progress. She had survived predators, navigated poisonous terrain, and outsmarted genetically enhanced warriors. Her body ached, but her mind was sharper than ever. Each challenge taught her something new: the value of patience, observation, and improvisation. A sudden rustling in the bushes reminded her that survival was never guaranteed. She grabbed her knife instinctively, ready for whatever came next, but the rustling was only a small creature, harmless but curious. She allowed herself a laugh, the first real one since arriving on Tarak.
9.
It was small, but it felt like victory. Kayla realized that surviving this class would not just require strength, it would require constant adaptation, clever thinking, and a refusal to give up. She would have to learn to anticipate threats, exploit weaknesses, and remain calm under pressure. Most importantly, she would have to trust herself even when everyone else doubted her. By the end of the second week, Kayla's reputation was growing. The instructors whispered about her ability to survive impossible challenges. The other candidates, once dismissive and mocking, now watched her cautiously, some even attempting to mimic her strategies. Kayla ignored them. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to survive, to learn, and to prove, first to herself, then to the galaxy, that humans could endure what others could not. Each night, as she rested under the alien stars of Tarak, 9, Kayla reminded herself of one truth. Humans had survived countless challenges on countless worlds. They were adaptable, clever, and relentless. She was a human, and if Tarak, 9 thought it could break her, it had underestimated the one thing that made humans dangerous: their indomitable will to survive. Kayla Ryden awoke to a sky that was neither night nor day. Tarak, 9 had strange rhythms, its sky painted in greenish hues that made it difficult to tell time. She shook off the stiffness in her muscles and checked her supplies. Hunger and exhaustion were constant, but they did not frighten her. Tarak, 9, was teaching her what no classroom ever could. Every mistake could be fatal, and every observation could save a life. The instructors gathered the candidates at a clearing that overlooked a valley shrouded in mist. Today's exercise was different. The voice of the lead instructor boomed across the clearing. The next challenge is a test of mind and will. Survival alone is not enough. You will face illusions, unpredictability, and threats unseen. Only those who think, adapt, and endure will succeed. Kayla's heart thumped. This was not about physical prowess. This was a trial of intelligence, perception, and calmness under pressure, exactly where humans excelled. She glanced at her fellow candidates, many of whom were large, muscular, and genetically enhanced. They looked confident, but Kayla noticed subtle signs of tension. For all their strength, this challenge was unfamiliar territory. The first scenario was a simulated predator hunt, but with a twist. Holographic predators, indistinguishable from real ones, prowled the valley. They could attack, adapt, and even communicate with one another. Many candidates charged forward, relying on their reflexes and weapons. Kayla took a deep breath and observed. She noted how the holograms moved, their patterns, the way they reacted to sound and light. Humans could detect patterns that brute force often overlooked. She moved slowly, carefully, using shadows and terrain to her advantage. When a holographic predator lunged, she dodged and redirected it into another projection. She survived not by strength, but by reading the environment and anticipating the predator's moves. Other candidates were less successful. Several were taken down quickly, caught off guard by illusions they assumed were real. The instructors observed silently, their expressions unreadable. Kayla noticed they were testing more than reflexes. They were measuring creativity, patience, and mental flexibility. She had been trained in careful observation for years in mundane administrative work, and that patience now became a weapon. After the first stage, the candidates moved to a psychological maze designed to confuse and disorient. The walls shifted, the floor moved, and voices called from directions that seemed impossible. Some candidates panicked, screaming or rushing blindly. Kayla closed her eyes briefly, listening carefully. By paying attention to subtle vibrations under her feet and tiny changes in airflow, she deduced the correct paths. It was grueling, both physically and mentally. Hours passed, yet Kayla continued. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, fatigue burned her muscles, and doubt whispered in her mind. She ignored it. Humans were masters of improvisation. Even when the world seemed against them, they found solutions. She trusted her instincts. Midway through the maze, a startling realization struck her. The maze was designed not just to test observation, but to measure fear management. Candidates who panicked reacted predictably, falling into traps or loops that forced them back to the start. Kayla slowed her breathing, focusing on each movement. Fear became a tool rather than an obstacle. She could predict how her opponents might respond, even before they themselves understood. By the time she reached the maze's exit, Her mind was exhausted, but her confidence had grown. She had faced challenges designed to break the mind, and she had adapted. The other candidates looked worn, confused, or defeated. Kayla felt a small surge of pride, not arrogance, just recognition that humans were capable of surviving what others thought impossible. The next phase involved strategic team simulations. The candidates were placed in groups and faced scenarios where cooperation was required, but trust was scarce. Kayla's group consisted of a mix of alien and enhanced candidates, many of whom assumed she would be a liability. Their mission: capture a high-value target while avoiding automated defenses and simulated ambushes. At first, her teammates ignored her suggestions, assuming she would slow them down. Kayla observed carefully, waiting for an opening. When the first ambush appeared, she shouted a warning and created a distraction by triggering a false signal. Her teammates hesitated, confused by her audacity, but her tactic worked. The ambush failed, and they could move forward safely. Over the course of the exercise, Kayla continued to make decisions that turned the team's potential failures into success. She analyzed patterns, predicted the enemy's moves, and positioned her team strategically. By the end, the high-value target was secured, and the instructors were clearly impressed. Even the aliens who had doubted her began to show respect. That evening, Kayla sat alone in a safe clearing, examining the day's lessons. Tarak, 9 was not merely a combat test. It was a test of thought, of perception, and of will. The other candidates were strong, but strength alone could not overcome strategy and adaptability. Humans had survived countless worlds through ingenuity, improvisation, and the ability to learn from every mistake. She realized that she had these traits in abundance. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of distant screams. Not far away, another team had been caught in a live simulation gone wrong. Kayla's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to focus. Panic would be lethal. Panic, she reminded herself. Observation first, action second. Fear was a signal, not a command. The following days brought more challenges, each more demanding than the last. Kayla faced environmental traps, pits, poisonous mists, shifting terrain, and survived by thinking several steps ahead. She faced mental simulations that tried to manipulate her perceptions, create confusion, and test loyalty within her group. Each time, she adapted, finding solutions the instructors had not anticipated. By the end of the week, Kayla's reputation had grown beyond whispers. The instructors began to take note, marking her progress with increased scrutiny. Her fellow candidates no longer laughed at her. Some tried to mimic her methods. Others avoided her, unwilling to face the consequences of underestimating her. Kayla herself was unaware of the full extent of her impact. She focused only on survival, learning, and observing. Every challenge taught her a new lesson. Humans were not the strongest, fastest, or largest beings in the galaxy, but they could endure, adapt, and innovate. On Tarak, 9, those qualities were more powerful than any cybernetic enhancement or genetic modification. The ultimate test of the week came in the form of a night survival trial. Candidates were dropped alone into the darkest part of the jungle, with no equipment beyond their basic kits. Predators, both real and holographic, prowled the forest. Visibility was near zero, and the sounds of the jungle were disorienting. Kayla relied entirely on her senses. She listened for the slightest rustle of leaves, felt vibrations through the ground, and smelled the subtle sense of approaching threats. Using her observations, she constructed makeshift traps and temporary shelters. Every move was calculated, deliberate, and measured. Hours passed in tense silence. Most candidates were eliminated within the first hour, panicking or making hasty mistakes. Kayla persisted, moving carefully, thinking creatively, and staying calm. When dawn broke, she was among the very few survivors. Exhausted but victorious, she realized that her greatest strength was not physical ability. It was her ability to think clearly under pressure. By the time the instructors called the trial over, Kayla's body ached, and her mind was exhausted. Yet she felt a sense of exhilaration. She had faced the most demanding psychological and environmental tests on Tarak. 9. And survived. The jungle, in all its danger and unpredictability, had taught her lessons that no classroom or instructor could. As she settled in for the night, Kayla reflected on the truth that had become clearer with every challenge. Humans were underestimated at every turn, often dismissed as weak or fragile. But the reality was that human ingenuity, patience, and willpower could overcome even the deadliest environments and the most formidable opponents. She had proven it to herself, and unknowingly to everyone watching. Kayla's journey was far from over. The final trials would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, forcing her to combine everything she had learned: observation, strategy, adaptability, and unbreakable will. But she was ready. Tarak. 9 had already shown her that survival was possible if one refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds.
And Kayla Ryden, ordinary human girl thrust into the galaxy's deadliest combat class, had already begun to redefine what it meant to be human on Tarak
9. Kayla Ryden stood at the edge of the arena, the largest clearing she had ever seen on Tarak. 9. The canopy overhead stretched like a living roof, dense and green, with sunlight barely filtering through. The ground beneath her boots was hard-packed dirt, scarred by previous exercises, littered with rocks, vines, and remnants of failed attempts by other candidates. Her opponents waited across the arena, a squad of elite, genetically enhanced warriors, hand-picked by the instructors as the final trial. They were taller, stronger, faster, and armed with weapons Kayla had only ever observed from a distance. Some had claws like steel blades. Others had energy shields that could absorb most human attacks. The odds were clear. On paper, she had no chance. But Kayla didn't care about odds. She cared about observation, improvisation, and the human will to survive. She checked her pack one last time. Her knife, basic survival gear. A few traps she had prepared, and her mind, sharpened by weeks of Tarak 9's brutal challenges. She was ready to fight, not with raw strength, but with intelligence. The horn sounded, echoing through the clearing, and the battle began. The elite squad charged forward, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Kayla dropped low, using the terrain as cover. Her first move was subtle. She baited the squad toward a shallow pit covered with vines and leaves. One of them fell in with a shout, his energy shield insufficient to protect him from the simple trap. The other warriors hesitated. They were skilled, but they had not anticipated the human's cleverness. Kayla used the pause to move silently through the underbrush, placing traps and marking the best escape routes. She knew she could not confront all of them at once. Tarak. 9's jungle could be an ally if used correctly. A warrior with cybernetic limbs lunged at her, claws extended. Kayla sidestepped, using his momentum to guide him toward one of her traps. A vine snapped tight around his leg, sending him crashing into a tree. Another warrior fired a plasma bolt at her, and she dove behind a fallen log, letting the energy strike harmlessly into the dirt. Every movement was calculated. Every action anticipated the enemy's strength and overconfidence. Kayla realized that her opponents underestimated her. They saw only a human, fragile and weak. But she was more than that. She was adaptable, patient, and willing to learn in the middle of battle. They relied on brute force. She relied on strategy. The battle continued for hours. Kayla moved like a shadow, striking where the warriors were weakest, using improvised weapons, terrain, and traps. She led them into swampy ground that slowed their movement, into narrow passages where their strength became a disadvantage. She created diversions, faked movements, and used echoes to confuse their senses. One by one, the elite warriors fell. Not because Kayla was stronger, but because she was smarter. The instructors watched from a distance, their expressions a mix of disbelief and admiration. Tarak 9 had been designed to test the galaxy's most formidable beings. Yet here was a single human girl, surviving against all odds. At one point, Kayla found herself facing the squad leader, the largest and most dangerous of them all. His energy shield was nearly impenetrable, and his strength could crush bone effortlessly. Kayla assessed her options quickly. Direct confrontation was suicide. Instead, she used a combination of misdirection and environment. She triggered a nearby set of dangling vines, causing a cascade of rocks to fall, momentarily disorienting him. While the leader scrambled, Kayla moved behind him, her knife poised. She didn't need to kill, she only needed to neutralize. A precise strike disabled a critical joint in his armor, and he collapsed, stunned. Kayla didn't wait. She retreated into the jungle, knowing the remaining warriors would now be hesitant to follow blindly.
The battle reached its climax when the last two warriors cornered her near a cliff. Why?
Their weapons glowed with lethal energy. Kayla's heart raced, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. She remembered everything Tarak 9 had taught her: observation, patience, and adaptability. She noticed the cliff edge was unstable. One false step, and it would give way. With careful timing, she feigned a stumble. The warriors lunged, confident they had her trapped. Kayla twisted, dodged, and guided their weight toward the cliff's edge. With a thunderous crash, the ground gave way beneath them, sending the two warriors tumbling into the ravine below. Kayla barely leapt back in time, heart pounding but victorious. Silence fell across the arena. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Kayla stood alone, victorious not through strength, but through intellect, observation, and determination. She looked around, the adrenaline still surging through her veins. Every challenge Tarak had thrown at her had been a lesson, and she had applied them all in this final test. The instructors approached. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, respect, and cautious admiration.
"This is unprecedented," the lead instructor said. "No candidate, human or otherwise, has ever completed this final trial without enhancements."
"You have survived, and you have proven the impossible."
Kayla allowed herself a small, tired smile. She wasn't thinking of glory or recognition. She was thinking of survival, of the lessons Tarak 9 had taught her, and of the strength that humans carried within themselves. Back at the encampment, the other candidates no longer whispered. They watched her with a mixture of awe and wariness. Some approached cautiously, seeking advice or strategy. Kayla did not offer easy answers. She had learned that respect on Tarak 9 was earned through action, not words. That night, Kayla reflected on the weeks she had spent on Tarak 9. She remembered the Razorback Stalker, the shifting maze, the psychological trials, and the elite warriors she had faced in the arena. Each challenge had been impossible at first glance, yet she had survived. She realized that her humanity, patience, adaptability, ingenuity had been the key. In the days that followed, Kayla was debriefed by instructors who documented her strategies, her decisions, and her remarkable survival. They admitted that her methods were unconventional, often overlooked by other species, but highly effective. She had done what no one else could: turn the Deathworld combat class into a test that celebrated human ingenuity. The final record was filed. Kayla Ryden, human ordinary in form but extraordinary in mind and spirit, had survived Tarak 9. She had outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and endured challenges designed to eliminate the unworthy. When the paperwork returned to the Galactic Academy, no corrections were made. The slip that had sent her to Deathworld combat class remained unchanged, a bureaucratic error preserved for posterity. Kayla did not mind. The slip had been the spark that ignited her journey. Without it, she would never have discovered the strength that lay hidden within humanity. Kayla's time on Tarak 9 became legendary. Instructors told future classes of the human girl who survived against impossible odds, and it whispered her name as a standard of what humans could achieve. Even the bureaucrats back at the academy, who had ignored the misfiled paperwork, began to take notice of the species they had long underestimated. Kayla herself remained humble. She did not consider herself stronger or better than anyone else. She had survived because she had used her mind, observed carefully, adapted quickly, and refused to give up. Those were traits any human could cultivate. One evening, as she walked through the quiet jungle, Kayla paused to look at the stars through the gaps in the canopy. Tarak, 9, had taught her more than survival. It had taught her about resilience, ingenuity, and the limitless potential of the human spirit. She smiled, thinking of how fragile humans appeared to others, yet how deadly they could be when pushed to the edge. Her journey on Tarak, 9, was over, but the lesson she carried with her would last a lifetime. Humans could survive, adapt, and even triumph in worlds that seemed designed to destroy them. Strength was not always physical. Intelligence, perseverance, and willpower could overcome almost any obstacle. As Kayla stepped back onto the shuttle that would take her home, she felt a quiet confidence. The galaxy would soon learn what she had already discovered. To underestimate a human was a mistake, and sometimes humans thrived when all odds were against them. Tarak, 9, had tried to break her. Instead, it had revealed the true strength of humanity. The shuttle lifted off, and Kayla looked out at the jungle shrinking below her. She thought of the Razorback stalker, the pitfalls, the traps, and the elite warriors she had faced. Every step, every choice, every observation had led to this moment. She had survived Tarak. 9, not because she was the strongest, but because she was human. And in that truth lay a power no amount of genetic modification, cybernetics, or brute strength could match. The human mind, the human will, and the unyielding determination to endure.